The silence following the holiday frenzy always carries a particular weight, a physical pressure that settles into the joints of the workshop. The elves were celebrating in the mess hall, their high-pitched songs filtering through the ice walls as a dull, rhythmic thrum, but I sought only the shadows of my private study. I collapsed into the high-backed chair, the leather groaning under the burden of a legend I no longer wished to carry. My fingers trembled, not from the lingering Arctic chill, but from a starvation that gnawed at my ribs. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. It was a mundane action, yet my pulse thundered in my ears like a war drum. Inside lay a singular item, a cardigan of softest cashmere, dyed a pale, trembling pink. I did not put it on. The risk was too great, the walls too thin. I simply ran my calloused, ash-stained thumb along the weave. For a second, the crushing weight of the red suit vanished, replaced by a phantom sensation of lightness, of Lacey breathing in the cold air. I closed my eyes, constructing a reality where I could wear this openly, sipping cocoa not as the father of Christmas, but as a woman comfortable in her own skin. "Boss?" The voice shattered the fantasy. My eyes snapped open. Pip stood in the doorway, his head cocked, a clipboard dangling from his grip. I had left the door ajar, a fatal amateur mistake. I slammed the drawer shut with a violence that made the inkwells rattle. "Pip," I barked, the sound harsh and foreign in my own throat. I twisted my body, shielding the desk, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Had he seen the pink? Had he seen the softness? Pip blinked, his large glassy eyes wide with confusion rather than suspicion. The reindeer feed manifest, sir. You didn't sign it." "Leave it," I commanded, breathless. "Get out." He scurried away, the door clicking shut behind him. I slumped forward, burying my face in my hands. The cold sweat on my brow had nothing to do with the temperature. I was a millennia-old entity, a guardian of wonder. Yet I was terrified of a 3-foot toy maker discovering that I preferred pink cashmere to red velvet. The gilded cage had never felt so small. Days bled into a gray haze of post-production cleanup. I found myself avoiding the elves, their cheerful camaraderie a stinging reminder of my own isolation. The mailroom was my penance. Mountains of envelopes arrived daily, thank-you notes, late wishes, complaints about wrong sizes. They were generic, mass-produced gratitude that felt as hollow as a plastic ornament. I sifted through the pile mechanically, my mind drifting back to the drawer, to the pink cardigan, to the terrifying moment with Pip. The fear had curdled into a deep, aching loneliness. I was surrounded by millions who loved the idea of me, yet not a single soul knew the person beneath the beard. Then my hand paused. Unlike the bright, chaotic scribbles of children or the sterile-typed letters of parents, this envelope was small, cream-colored, and sealed with a simple drop of unbranded wax. There was no return address, only a small, hand-drawn symbol in the corner, a sparrow. I sliced it open, the paper feeling heavy and expensive between my fingers. Inside, there was no list of demands. It was a single sheet of unlined paper. In the center was a sketch, rendered in charcoal with delicate, deliberate strokes. It depicted the silk scarf I had left at the house in the Midwest, a Elara scarf. The fabric in the drawing rippled as if caught in a breeze, looking more real than the wood of my desk. Below the drawing, in an elegant, looping script, were 3 sentences. The fabric whispers of a world I thought I had to imagine alone. Thank you for seeing the woman in the window. You have no idea how much warmth a single piece of silk can hold. My breath hitched. She knew. She recognized the shared frequency of our souls. I traced the charcoal lines, smudging the black dust onto my fingertip. In this frozen wasteland, where I was forced to be a monument to masculinity, a girl in a small snowy town had reached back through the dark. I wasn't just a delivery system for toys. I was a lifeline. And for the first time in centuries, holding her letter against my chest, I felt the ice around my heart begin to crack. The wind clawed at the frosted panes of the bedroom window, a relentless, shrieking reminder of the desolate expanse outside. I lay rigid beneath the heavy quilts, the darkness of the room pressing against my eyelids, yet sleep remained a distant country I could not visit. Every time I drifted, the image of Pip's wide, confused eyes snapped me back to the waking world. He had seen the sliver of pink silk. He had seen the study door ajar. The near miss tasted like ash in my mouth, a metallic tang of panic that refused to fade. Beside me, Carol breathed in a slow, rhythmic cadence, a sound that usually anchored me. Tonight, it felt like a countdown. She slept the sleep of the righteous, of the uncomplicated. I was a stranger in her bed, a fraud wrapped in gray flannel. The urge to shed this skin, to peel back the layers of Nicholas and Santa and the heavy, jovial mask I wore for the world, became a physical ache in my chest. I could not stay here, paralyzed by the ghost of an elf's curiosity. I slid from the warmth of the bed, my bare feet meeting the biting cold of the floorboards. The shadows of the hallway swallowed me as I crept toward the one place where the air didn't feel quite so thin. The lock on my private study door clicked shut, the sound a definitive barrier against the North Pole's expectations. My hands trembled, not from the creeping frost, but from a desperate, starving need. I moved to the hidden alcove, my fingers deftly navigating the intricate latches of the false-bottom chest. The scent of lavender and cedar rose to greet me, the scent of her. Shedding the coarse flannel felt like stepping out of a prison uniform. I pulled on the stockings first, the sheer fabric gliding over skin that had known only wool and fur for centuries. The skirt followed, a charcoal pleat that settled on my waist, suggesting a silhouette I wasn't born with but had always carried. Finally, the cardigan. The dusty rose cashmere was a whisper against my arms, soft and forgiving. I turned to the tall, ice-rimmed mirror standing in the corner. The glass was old, silvered with age, but the reflection was sharp enough to cut. Lacey looked back at me. For a heartbeat, the joy was absolute. I saw the softness in my eyes, the way my posture shifted from the heavy, lumbering stance of the toy maker to something lighter, more fluid. I saw the person I was meant to be. But then the illusion fractured. The white beard, the weathered face of an ancient patriarch, the broad shoulders that carried the world's wishes, they remained, stark and undeniable against the feminine grace of the clothes. The contrast was a violent collision of truth and duty. I brought a hand up, tracing the line of the pearl buttons, seeing a beautiful lie and a tragic truth existing in the same space. I was a masterpiece painted over a crumbling wall. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. I whispered her name to the empty room, Lacey, just to hear it exist in the air, a fragile prayer in a cathedral of ice. The ritual of undressing was a funeral. Folding the cardigan, smoothing the skirt, locking Lacey back into the dark, it drained the color from the world. I returned to the bedroom, the floorboards groaning under the renewed weight of my sorrow. Carol had shifted, her hand outstretched across my empty pillow. I stood by the bedside, looking down at her familiar, kind face softened by sleep. The words formed on my tongue, heavy as stones. Carol, I need you to see me, the real me. I imagined waking her. I imagined the confusion turning to shock, perhaps disgust, or worse, pity. The fear clamped around my throat, silencing the confession before it could be born. I could not risk shattering her world. I could not be the hammer that broke the trust of Mrs. Claus. I sank back into the bed, the cold sheets biting my skin. The isolation felt absolute, a vast tundra stretching out in all directions. Then, a flicker of warmth sparked in the back of my mind. I thought of the letter on my desk, hidden beneath invoices and lists, the sketch of the scarf, Elara. She was out there, in a small town blanketed by the same winter, hiding her own softness from a hard world. She didn't know me, not really, but she knew this feeling. She knew the weight of a secret kept in the dark. I wasn't entirely alone. Somewhere, amidst the sleeping millions, another heart beat in time with mine, longing for a freedom we could only touch in the shadows. I closed my eyes, clinging to that invisible thread, letting the thought of her quiet strength pull me through the rest of the night. The silence of the North Pole in January is heavier than any blizzard. The frantic bells and whistles cacophony of the season had evaporated, leaving behind a stale, sterile void that the wind howled through without mercy. I sat in my study, the grand hearth cold, staring at the frost creeping across the window pane. The workshop below lay dormant. The elves collapsed into their weeks of hibernation, leaving me alone with the ghosts of the holiday past. My reflection in the darkened glass showed a tired old man, beard gray and unruly, but my legs, crossed beneath the desk, tingled with the electric slide of nylon against my skin. It was a pathetic rebellion, a tiny spark of Lacey trying to survive the smothering weight of Nicholas. My thoughts drifted, as they had every hour since Christmas Eve, to the small, snow-dusted house in the Midwest. Elara. I imagined her touching the silk scarf I had left, her fingers tracing the hem in the privacy of her room. Did she feel the kinship, or did she think it merely a misplaced gift? The isolation of my existence felt sharper this year. The ho-ho-ho had been a performance that drained the marrow from my bones. I needed to know that someone else out there understood the suffocation of a mask. I needed to bridge the chasm between my ice palace and her silent suburban prison. I pulled a sheet of parchment from the drawer, the paper thick and cream-colored, lacking the official Kringle watermark. My hand trembled, not from age, but from the sheer illicit nature of the act. To reach out was forbidden. Santa is a symbol, not a pen pal. Yet the ink flowed dark and permanent. I did not write of elves or reindeer. Instead, I wrote of shadows. I wrote of the beauty found in the things we hide in the back of the closet. I crafted phrases that would mean nothing to the uninitiated, but would ring like a church bell to a soul starving for validation. With a deep breath, I summoned the old magic. Not the bright, flashy sparkles of toy-making, but the ancient, subtle currents that guide lost travelers. I pressed my thumb into the wax, infusing the seal with a gentle compulsion, a nudge that would guide her to a specific corner of the digital world. The gilded thread, a quiet forum for the outcast and the artistic. It was a risk. If the council intercepted this, if Carol found the draft, the questions would be unanswerable. But the alternative was a silence that would eventually swallow me whole. I folded the letter, the paper feeling like a stick of dynamite in my grip. I moved to the balcony doors, the lavender shawl clutching my shoulders like a lover's embrace. The wind battered the glass, demanding entry, a savage reminder of the hostile world outside my sanctuary. I unlocked the latch and stepped out. The cold bit instantly, fierce and stinging, but the soft wool against my neck offered a fragile shield. Below, the ice field stretched into infinity, a vast blue-black ocean of solitude. I held the letter up to the gale. This was not a delivery for the sleigh. This required the wind spirits, the ancient carriers of whispers. "Find her," I murmured, the words snatched away before they fully left my lips. "Find the one who hides." I released the parchment. It did not fall. The magic caught it, swirling it upward into the aurora-streaked sky, a pale moth fluttering into the darkness. Watching it disappear, a terrifying vulnerability bloomed in my chest. I had opened a door. I had invited a witness into my life. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but beneath it, for the first time in centuries, a warm, terrifying hope began to thaw the ice around my heart. I was Lacey, standing in the storm, waiting for an echo.
If you love this video, smash the like button and share with friends. Let me know in the comments what you want to see next. Ho, 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 ho.